Hey everyone, Justin here. So it's time to talk about my honest thoughts on Generation 5. So the games in Generation 5 consist of Pokemon Black and White and Pokemon Black and White 2. So I did own Pokemon Black and I own Pokemon Black 2. I never actually got around to beating Black 2, admittedly. I do remember I got all the badges. I don't remember if I got the Elite Four. So what I think I'm going to do is I'm just going to talk about Black and White here. And then I think I'll do a separate video talking about Black and White too. Like I'll just find a copy of the game and play it and beat it, do my honest thoughts on it. So, Pokemon Black and White. So, to put this into perspective, so I admitted that Diamond and Pearl almost took me out of the franchise. So I do remember that as Black and White were being announced, there was, they were doing updates, promotional stuff. I do remember saying, all right, I'm going to give Pokemon one more chance to really wow me this time. And if it can't, then I'm going to say that, maybe this game franchise just isn't for me anymore. And I'm not going to lie, some of the new Pokemon designs were, you know, had me a little worried. But I will say this, I was pleasantly surprised when I picked up the game. So I got the game, and it was really fun. One feature I really liked that I thought was interesting that they did at the beginning was, so you pick your starter, and I like that you actually had two rivals this time. One rival, basically there was a rival for each starter, and I like that they battled you throughout the game. One was obviously more challenging than the others, but I liked that they each had their own little backstories and personalities. It's also the first time we got a female professor. Not that I really think that made or broke the game, but it was definitely interesting, and I feel like she was more involved in the story than previous professors had been, which was really cool. Um, so one complaint I know a lot of people had with the game was they felt it was too easy. I actually have to disagree. I actually personally thought Black and White 2 were I'm sorry. I thought Black and White were one of the more challenging games. Like it was one of the few games where I felt like the junior trainers actually gave me trouble. Like one of the complaints about the difficulty factor was, like for example, the first gym, they use one of the elemental monkeys. It's whichever one has the type advantage over your starter. So like I've been playing Black again, and I chose Snivy, so I fought the gym leader that used Panseer, and there's somebody outside the town who gives you the advantage over that one. Well, I don't really know what the big deal is, considering red and blue, and even yellow, always had something you could catch outside the gym that would help you. I mean, maybe not so much when it came to Brock, but I mean, just give you an example. Like Misty was the water type gym leader, so either you had a Pikachu in Viridian. If you didn't get a Pikachu in Viridian Forest, you could go north of Cerulean and get either an Oddish or a Bellsprout, depending on which version you had. I don't see what the or with Erica. She was a plant type gym leader. You could get Vulpix or Growlithe outside of the Celadon City. So once again, this was a feature that's always been there. I don't know why everyone thinks it's a big deal. Oh, or I also like that there were certain routes where you would have people who would heal your Pokemon. Once again, I don't see what the big deal is. I mean, because in older games, like if I was training my guys on a route, like I would have to backtrack to a Pokemon Center. So why take away something that was a tedious process I was going to do anyway? I don't see the problem here. Yeah, I thought the gym leaders were a lot tougher, and I thought a lot of the junior trainers were a lot tougher. Oh god, especially in the eighth gym, the dragon type gym. Yeah, those junior trainers were hard. I remember thinking, oh god, if that's the junior trainer, I can only imagine how the gym leader's gonna be. Um, but one feature I do remember that they added here that I thought was interesting was they did triple battles in the white version, and they did rotation battles in the black version. Now, I have noticed that this feature has never made a return in any other Pokemon game, and we're now 4 generations past black and white. and there weren't many of them in the game anyway. I'm like starting to think that Game Freak realized that maybe the feature was a little gimmicky and they didn't come back, which honestly I was okay with. The triple battles I didn't mind so much because you had a chance to give experience points to like beat them Pokemon. But the rotation battles, I'm not gonna lie, I thought that it was kind of a long drawn out process. Yeah, it was basically just triple battling, but just a more long drawn out process. But it was a cool idea, and I appreciate him for trying something new. As far as the new Pokemon goes, so Black and White was meant to be a soft reboot of the series because at least during the first playthrough of the game, not counting post game, none of the Pokemon from previous generations are available, which I thought was really interesting. And even now, like I found that there's a lot of guys I want to add to my team, but obviously you can only carry 6, so I just carry the ones that I think are going to get the most use. So, while I'm not the biggest fan of some of the Generation 5 Pokemon, I will say that at least it actually felt like there was some effort put into them. It wasn't like, Diamond and Pearl, where I said some of the evolutions just felt like fat, ugly versions of previous Pokemon. Well, I don't think I mentioned this in the Gen 2 video, but, like the baby Pokemon, which that's a whole nother rant for another day, where I felt like there was a lot of baby Pokemon, like who really uses those? Yeah, this another thing. I don't know if this has anything to do with being a soft reset, but so the first 4 games were all based off of different parts of Japan, like the regions were. This one was the first one to be based off of the continental United States. The Unova region is based off of New York City and like parts of New Jersey. Now, like I said, I don't know if that was part of the reset, like, hey, let's go to a whole new place. Originally when I recorded this, I said this is the only one to date based on the US, and that's not entirely true because Alola is based on Hawaii, which is part of the US, although having been to Hawaii, that feels like a whole nother country, but we'll talk about that when we get to the Gen 7 video. And then, I know in Pokemon Coliseum, the Ore region I've read was based off of Arizona, but that's not a mainline game, so I'm not going to count that. But back to Black and White. So you had Team Plasma, which they were interesting. I remember kind of the joke was that they were like the PETA of the Pokemon world. And it's true. Like, they wanted to liberate trainers from their Pokemon. Like, they wanted to show that, like, Pokemon didn't want to be captured. They didn't want to be battled against other Pokemon. But I think it's kind of an interesting concept. I mean, they're not my favorite evil team, but, they weren't bad for what they were. And then, I like that they had a leader in Gathus and N. I like that N, like, his, like, viewpoint kind of changes, like, as you meet him and you battle him. He was a really interesting character. Now, I do have to admit, I do need to go back and battle Gathus and, like, the Sages. The Elite Four, something I thought was really interesting about the Elite Four is you actually got to choose the order that you battled them in. So, here's the thing, when I originally played Black and White, so you don't actually battle the champion your first go around in the Unova League, because Team Plasma interrupts the league battle, or your championship challenge before you fight the champion. As much as I can spoil a game that's like 14 years old, so you would have to go back and fight the real champion, who is Alder. I never actually battled him. I just never got around to it. You'll notice that as a trend as I do these honest reviews, that the older I got, the less time I had to dedicate to these games. Plus, there's also a lot more post-game content, I feel, in these games than there were in, say, like, Gen 1 and... I don't really want to say Gen 2, but definitely, like... There's definitely more post-game content than, say, like, Gen 1 and 3. But, yeah, I do want to go back and battle Alder. And, of course, finish off Gethys and the Sages. But, so I thought it was interesting that you could choose the order you fought the Elite Four in. The gym leaders, I don't know why, I can't believe I almost forgot to talk about this. The gym leaders, I like that they were more involved in the story. Like, they actually left their gyms and interacted with you and helped you out with the Team Plasma conflict. So that is honestly something that I think should be a thing in Pokemon games. Just make a good story. It's scientifically proven that the best way to reach people is through storytelling. And I mean, hey, when you think about it, just look at mythology. That was just to explain things, and it reached people. So I feel like, and it doesn't have to be for I know one of the things that I've heard, I don't want to pass off as fact, but I've heard that one of the inspirations for Unova being a soft reboot was the fact that, a lot of the kids who played like Gen 1, like me, have now grown up, so they wanted to make the story a little more mature. And here's the thing, I don't think you need to be young or old. I mean, I think as you're older, you appreciate and you see more of these story elements because you've lived a little longer. But I think if you just make a good story, you can reach anyone, young or old fans. So that's something I really wish Pokemon would do more with their games. It's just, of course, give us new creatures. That's why we play the games. But I focus on the story. I feel that'll definitely keep us coming back. Um, but yeah, so I really loved this generation. Oh, and another new feature I thought was kind of neat here was that when you battled against a friend, you could actually use items in battle. I thought that was kind of neat. Just a little thing. So where would I rank? Oh, and I rank the game. I will never forget it. After I defeated N at the end of like the first playthrough, um, I remember texting a friend. And I was like, Black and White was really good. I have not had a Pokemon game I couldn't put down since Gold and Silver came out back in like 2000. So, where would I rank Black and White? I'm going to rank them at number one. Um, I know that might seem a little high for right now, and it very well could be, because I don't know what other generations are coming out, in the future. But for right now, it is number one. So, why is it number one for me? Well, I will say I think one of the contributing factors was how much the game really wowed me. Because like I said, after Diamond and Pearl, my expectations were on the floor. But after I played Black and White, it was like, wow, Pokemon can still do this. It still got it. And I loved the characters. I loved the story. Like, it had me wanting more. And like I said, even the new Pokemon they added weren't bad at all. There was definitely, I could tell, some love and creativity put into this game. One more thing before I bounce, and I'm sorry, before I rank. I always found it funny that people complained about some of the Pokemon designs, like Vanilla Ice being an ice cream cone, or like Clink just being like gears. Well, isn't that kind of funny that y'all never complained about Voltorb basically just being a Pokeball with eyes, or Magnemite being a magnet with eyes, or Grimer just being a pile of slime, you know? But apparently when Gen 5 does it, it sucks. Just wanted to throw that out there. But where would I rank? But yes, like I said, I would rank this number one for right now. Like I said, could it be dethroned in the future? Entirely possible. Only time will tell. I will say, based on what I've played with the newer games, I don't think so, but here's hope. And I'm really hoping that here soon we should get remakes of Black and White. I can't imagine we wouldn't get remakes just simply because, well, the remakes have always done well when they come out. And, Diamond and Pearl was our last remake, so I feel like it's due time. My guess would be if we do get Black and White remakes, my guess is it'll probably come out around when Generation 10 comes out, whenever that may be. And I say this just simply because Generation 9's already been out for about 2 years, so I'm sure within the next year or so we'll probably get an announcement for Gen 10. Just a guess. But anyway, I think I've said all I need to say for right now. Like I said, I will do a video on on Black and White 2. If you guys want me to do a video on the games I missed, like Platinum and Crystal, let me know below, and I'll definitely try to hunt down the games. But until then, be sure to rate, comment, and subscribe, and let me know your opinions on Black and White. And I will see you in the next one.